Welcome to the Chaffin Church podcast. My name is Marty Holman, and you call me fat.
I didn't call you fat.
You called me fat.
Maybe indirectly. I just said good luck with that.
Welcome to the Chaffin Church podcast. My name is Marty Holman, and I am with my good friend Sean Leary.
Good morning.
And good morning, Sean. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks for stopping by. I'm going to take care of some business real quick. Hey, thanks for listening to the podcast or watching the podcast on YouTube or anywhere podcasts are available. And so make sure you share it, rate it, review it, subscribe to it. And we are thankful that you listen in. Today's podcast, we're going to get right into it. And we're going to talk a little bit about sports, kids, and the community. And I really think that sports are good for community. I love sports. I love some of the greatest teams in sports for all time. And we're just going to see if he had any comments about that. We'll probably talk about that a little bit. And
I'm sure we will.
So, Sean, to get us started, what sports do you play? Or have you played personally?
Oh, sure. Growing up, I played, back in the day, right? There wasn't a lot of options like there are now.
Yeah.
So I played football, basketball, and baseball. Ran some track in high school. Did some swimming when I was, younger, swimming lessons, and a little bit of competitive swimming when I was a little kid, but that's about it.
Yeah. So I should say, this is a pretty important point. One of the reasons why I've asked you to be here, so Sean has 8 kids. Him and his wife are monster parents. Probably not a positive thing, but like really good parents. 8 kids, pretty crazy, awesome family, and they all love sports. And so, and you yourself love sports. You're a coach and have been a coach. Are you coaching right now?
I'm not coaching right now.
You're not coaching? Okay. Do you like that? Do you like the break or?
Yeah, I felt like I coached for about 20 years between youth sports and high school sports, and I was just ready for another phase in my life, and so it's worked out good.
Nice.
I tell everybody I'll get back into coaching when my grandchildren are old enough to be competing.
Well, we're not far away from that.
We're not far
right?
away from that. Oliver's almost 3, so.
Wow,
yeah.
That's crazy. Your youngest kids were 3 when I met you.
That sounds about right.
Right?
Yeah.
They were pretty young, or maybe they were newborn actually.
No, we met in like 08, 09.
Yeah.
It was 07, 08, 09. Riley was born in 05, so yeah, she was like 2 or 3.
Wow. So you have 8 kids. Most of your kids, if not all of them, love sports. Do they all love sports, or are there a few of them that?
I would say at one point or another, they all really enjoyed, competing and participating in sports and athletics, and they were all, fairly active in, keeping themselves in shape and taking care of themselves.
So was that highlighted in your home, or is that just something that happened? You think that was something that came from you and Margaret?
So I grew up in a household with both my parents were teachers.
Okay.
My dad was a high school teacher and a coach, and my mom was an elementary school teacher, and they both were athletes growing up. My mother doesn't get much credit for that, but she was an athlete. She played high school basketball. Back when she loved to talk about when she played, the rules were different, and all 5 players couldn't go up and down the court because it was too strenuous, and females are weaker than males, and so that's a joke, right? But that's what it was like back then.
Wow.
So it was kind of like lacrosse. Like I think there was 3 on one end and 2 on the other or something. I don't know. It was weird.
Wow.
Like they didn't go the full court. So I don't know exactly what the rules were. But so she did that, and she competed in some other stuff. And my dad was high school athlete, played football in college, and played some semi-pro football, and then high school phys ed teacher and coach. And so my sister and I were, brought up where it was an active household. We were encouraged to try different things and participate in different things. And it wasn't just limited to athletics. My sister learned horse riding.
Okay.
We did some different things. So I think that carried over. Margaret grew up in a similar household, where she and her brothers and sisters were encouraged to, try and do different things, to be exposed to different opportunities and to find things that, that they liked. And so that spilled over into our family, I believe, when we started having kids and started raising them.
Yeah. What do you think it is about sports that helps kids? I mean, I've always believed that sports is a really powerful thing for kids, specifically team sports, but maybe both. What do you think it is about sports that helps kids?
So, I mean, you hear thrown around a lot, especially like in education, like educating the whole person. Okay.
Okay.
And so, what does that mean? Mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. There's a lot of components to us as human beings, and I believe that you need to, feed all of those to really complete yourself. If you're empty in a certain area, it's going to affect you in other areas, kind of as a general rule.
Yeah.
And so I believe that, God gave us all these different talents and abilities, and gave us a desire, especially when we're younger, to explore and to be inquisitive and to want to learn different things. And certainly we all know, when you look at young kids, we all know young kids. You can look at someone and say, "Oh, they're a bookworm," right? To use a catchphrase, right?
Yes.
They like to sit in the corner and read, or to study, or to do different things. And then you see another young person like your son who just literally bounces off the walls, right? They're maybe given talents in a different direction, and maybe they're drawn to things that are more physical. It doesn't mean that those two people don't have other abilities, but those are maybe what they're specifically drawn to, right? And so, but I think we're definitely all given, that desire to learn different things, and maybe some people aren't given the opportunities and they gravitate to, a certain direction, but it all feeds together.
So let's look at that. In that case, you have one student who is really into academics, and they love academics, and they might even to the kind of ignoring of other things like sports. They're just all into academics, and would sports in that scenario, do you think, help them or hurt them?
Yeah, you gave me the questions beforehand, so I was looking through things. I was looking forward to this question.
Okay.
Because it's common. I think a lot of people ask that question, or are curious about it. It's kind of a silly question.
Okay.
Because if we flip the tables and said, well, look at, that young person definitely is God-given athletic ability, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what sport they do. They can hit the baseball, they can throw the football, whatever. We know people like that, right? I think you would probably laugh at me if I said, well, do you think it would hurt them or help them if they took math class?
Interesting, yeah.
Right?
And,
so you would laugh and say, what are you talking about? That's ridiculous, right? And I look at your question kind of the same way, like,
interesting.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous to think that might not be beneficial. It's definitely beneficial. There's no doubt that, we were, like I said, I'm repeating myself a little bit, but we were born to be inquisitive. That should last our whole life. We should be lifelong learners. We were given that ability, and it can only help.
Yeah.
The more we can learn about different things and the more we can experience, it absolutely spills over into other aspects of our life. And I've coached all kinds of different kids, especially in local youth sports, all kinds of different kids.
Yeah.
And Holden's great for youth sports.
Yeah.
It's actually why you and I know each other. When Margaret and I moved back to the area, and I talked to my father about, where should we look to live, and it was going to be in this area. And the advice he gave me was, one of the things that we should look at is drive around town and look at the youth sports facilities and talk to people and find out about the youth sports leagues. And any town that invests heavily into youth activities
Wow.
that's a really good indication that it's a good town to live in, that it's a good family environment, that they care about kids.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the main reasons we settled in Holden. And
Wow.
if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have met you. So
Yeah.
it's just one of the reasons that we met. So, anyways, I coached a lot of different types of personalities and stuff, and really rewarding to see how a young person who maybe hasn't been exposed as much to athletics and team sports and that environment, how much they can grow. And how rewarding it is for them to realize that they have the ability to be successful in a different area of their life, and that builds confidence, it builds self-esteem, and then that certainly helps in other areas.
All right, so I mentioned earlier team sports and individual sports. What are some of the advantages of team sports versus advantages of individual sports? Boxing, golf, tennis versus basketball, football, soccer.
Sure. So I've coached at the local level, flag football, youth basketball a little bit, and Little League baseball. At the high school level, I coached football and track and field. So track and field is a team sport, but it's also very individual. So I've had the opportunity to coach in both areas, and all of it's beneficial. I would say the advantages of team sports, especially for younger people, are it's a great opportunity to have fun. It's a great opportunity to make friends.
Yeah.
It's a great opportunity to learn something new, and it's a great opportunity to challenge yourself to learn that it's not all up to you, which is good, right?
Yeah.
And to learn how to contribute into being a team. A good example of that is flag football, right?
Yeah.
What does every kid want to do?
Quarterback.
They want to be the quarterback,
Yeah.
right? And so there's only one quarterback on the field at the time. And unfortunately, even at the youth football level and flag football, which is really just recreational, with competitive but recreational at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Kids don't remember the score, and it's they just want to have fun. You don't have time to train 11 kids to be the quarterback, so you have to get some kids to buy into being a lineman. And it's a great lesson to learn that the team has different components and everybody has to contribute, and football is really the ultimate team sport, and if all 11 or 7 people in flag football don't play together, the team will never be successful.
Right.
And all of those kids that I coached that wanted to be a quarterback but ended up playing another position, by the end of the season really bought in and were excited about their job and being successful at their job and how that contributed to success in the team. And certainly that's life.
It really is.
Wow. It's very rare that you go through life without being on some team, whether it's at work, whether it's in church, or whether it's at home. I mean, if you're married, you have a team.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If you attend a church, you're part of a team.
Yeah.
If you work for a company, then you're part of a team. And at some level, success is defined by everybody's input into that team.
So good. So obviously, you talked about going into Holden and looking at how much they invested in their youth sports. I think Holden does that pretty well. Do you think sports connects a community, and how does it affect a community in general?
Yeah, can we actually, I didn't, I'll answer that question, but I think there's more to talk about on the previous question.
Okay.
I didn't really answer that. How much time do we have?
We have plenty of time.
Yeah, great.
We've been moving fast. So.
Yeah, so I talked about team sports. I wanted to address individual sports as well. So,
Okay.
Yeah, so, advantages of, I talked about some advantages of, team sports. Individual sports, first of all, people should try to expose themselves to as much as possible. As a general rule, it's difficult to play team sports your whole life, okay? If you're a football player in high school and college, if you're fortunate enough to go that far, that's probably as far as you're going to go for most people. You can play rec league basketball,
not for me.
like if you're like Marty.
Yeah,
You can be the hometown hero at Tuesday nights and nail some threes.
Monday nights, but whatever.
Whatever. Yeah, that's Monday nights because we come to my house after the games for Monday Night Football. But generally speaking, it becomes more challenging to be, involved in team sports the older that you get. And most athletes, gravitate towards more individual sports. Yeah. Tennis, running, triathlons, weightlifting, working out, things like that. So if you have an opportunity to get exposed to some of that when you're younger, that's great. Yeah. Because at some point in your life, if you are active, you're going to end up doing individual sport. Right. One of the great things about an individual sport is there's nowhere to hide, okay? If you're part of a team, especially football, because there's 11 people on the field, 22 counting both teams, right? It can be kind of easy to hide a little bit, right? Like if the play's going the other way, maybe you don't have to give the best effort, and that nobody's going to notice, all that kind of stuff, right? Not saying people do that, but if you're running a 400-meter dash, okay, or you're running a mile, or you're swimming a 200-yard butterfly, or whatever it is, or if you're doing the pole vault, and it doesn't work out great, there's nowhere to point, right?
It's on you.
Right, there's nobody to blame, right? Yeah. Reality. So that was one of the great things about coaching track was, we can talk about parents at some point in time and the challenges of that, but I very rarely had parents complain when I was a track coach because their son or daughter went out and ran, and they ran the time that they ran, and it is what it is, right? And so there's this different level of being able to evaluate yourself, and you learn a tremendous amount from that, right? Yeah. When you are out on an island and you challenge yourself. That when you step on the starting line, and at the end of that race, there's going to be a time that's your time. It's assigned to you. It's what you did. That's your performance. You're putting yourself out there to do that because that's going to happen at the end. Yeah. And everybody has good days and everybody has bad days. People win and people lose, and you're getting into that arena, and there's nowhere to hide. Yep. There's nowhere to blame. No fingers to point. So you learn a lot about yourself, and it was really fun to see high school athletes challenge themselves to do that. A lot of kids that had never competed in track and field before, and we would set goals at the beginning of the season, personal goals, like, hey, look, that was your first meet, you ran this time, let's try to do this by the end of the season, and they could work towards that, and they could see incrementally if they were making progress and decide whether they wanted to work hard enough to achieve that goal. And so you learn a lot about yourself, you learn a lot about work ethic, setting goals, and working towards achieving those goals, which again, real life.
I mean, one of the issues for me, 10 years ago I started running, right? I think it was 10 years ago, literally this year last, and did very well. I ran, I think, 20 miles at one point, ran a couple half marathons, crushed any records, right, and did very well. But then I stopped running when we had kids, right? And so then later on, I come to this point where I wanted to start running again, and I couldn't, and it was irritating to me because I couldn't beat my time. Right. Because I was nowhere near the shape I was in 10 years ago or 5 years ago or 4, whatever. And so I used that, I didn't use it as I couldn't use it. It was almost like, I can't beat myself, it's not worth it, right? And so how many times do we just kind of stay away from getting where we need to be physically as adults? Because for whatever reason, there's all sorts of reasons. We're too busy, whatever. I mean, I assume you see that a lot of times from people. Sure. At a time where we should really be more physical. Right. Then, of course, we're always trying to build habits, but. Right.
Yeah, there's fear of failure there, right? Yeah. And the reality is that we We do slow down as we get older. I know you have. I mean, not as much, but you definitely have.
I would be glad to try it, to test that as well.
Yeah, maybe we can do that. We'll lay down a gauntlet, and 6 months we'll run a race.
Okay.
We'll talk about that off the camera, but certainly all that stuff plays in, right? And some people have a hard time with that. Other people, learn to embrace it and reset their goals and new challenges and have a way to deal with that. But yeah, I think when you boil it down, it's fear of failure. Yeah. And it's easier to sit on the couch.
Yeah, it is way easier. I saw some video on YouTube. It was like a very brief video, and it talked to some guy who just said, you know what? I think it was, what was his name? He was David Guerda or something. He was a Navy SEAL. Oh, yeah. And he was just talking. He basically said, the reason you don't get up and do the thing you want to do is you. It's no one else. It's no other excuses. You're just being lazy. And I was like, you know what? That's so true.
Yeah.
So true. So in November, I bought a Y membership and got back into it.
And you were there this morning.
I was there this morning at 5:15.
Yeah, that's the way to do it.
And and it's so true. But as adults, we just kind of it's so easy to sit on the couch and
well, there's a lot of reasons. We'll get off track a little bit, but it's cultural too, right? I'm looking out the window at all the cars driving by, and most of them have one person in them. Mm-hmm. If you ever get a chance to read about Teddy Roosevelt, really cool person, right? He was president.
Yeah, president.
And, he was born, and he was very sick as a child. I don't know what he had, but like lung stuff, right?
Yeah.
And very sickly as a child. And when he was got to be like a teenager, he decided that he was going to beat that by being active, and he started walking. Wow. And at one point, he was living in Boston, and he met a woman who ended up being his wife, and he was living in Cambridge, I believe, and she was in Newton. And we're in the Boston area. We know how far apart those are, right?
Right.
So every day, he would walk from Cambridge to Newton.
Wow.
To see her and back every day.
Wow.
Just walking like 20 or 25 miles a day. And I did some studying, and that was common, back before, cars were everywhere, and not everybody had horses, so people walked. And I'll send you a link to this, but I read this story about what was called the greatest acceptance speech for a Nobel Prize laureate. And it was a really cool read. It was an author, and he talks about human nature and some other stuff. But one of the things he talks about is being idle, and that causing problems for people, right? And he told how he walked 25 miles a day, and that if you walk 25 miles a day, you've fulfilled yourself enough that you don't need to go look to do anything else, and it keeps you out of trouble, essentially. But the point is he walked 25 miles a day. Most people couldn't walk 25 miles in a month nowadays.
Oh, yeah.
And but I think that was common, and it's just one of the things that's changed in our society with convenience. And I'm not saying that the conveniences are bad, but it has changed how we do things and the opportunity to be as active as I think people used to be.
Well, let me go. I'm going to skip that question I asked you earlier and go to the next one, because I think we'll come back to the last.
Okay.
How then? And I know we're delving into, but I sent you this question, so it's all good. How does your physical health affect one's spiritual health?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier, just my opinion.
Yeah.
It's not my opinion. This isn't my opinion. The first part, there's no question that, there's many components to us as human beings, and that they're all tied together. That's a fact, right? Our spiritual self, our emotional self, our physical self, et cetera, right? Yeah. There's no doubt that those are all tied together, and that they interact and they complete us as a person. Yeah. And so my personal experience is that, when I'm most active in all of those areas, that I'm a better person all around. Yep. I have a better attitude. I'm healthier. Yep.
You feel healthier.
I sleep better. I'm more active.
Yeah.
So there's no doubt that being spiritual helps you be active and physical and take care of yourself,
Yeah.
and vice versa.
Yes.
If you're lacking in significantly in that area, let's say the physical area, there's no doubt it makes it harder to be as successful in the other areas. So
that's good. And then in terms of community and relationships, how do you think sports connects a community?
So at youth sports and through the high school level, I mean, absolutely, it varies from community to community. Different things, are more important in different communities. I'll give you an example, like Everett. Okay.
Okay.
Huge tradition of high school football going back to the 1950s. If you go to Everett on a Friday night during the fall and go to a high school football game, first of all, the team's really good always.
Okay.
Because the school and the community pour a lot of resources into it. It's important to the community, and the stands are packed.
Okay. So they kind of mirrored Texas.
It is like a little slice of Texas.
I haven't seen. I was actually thinking about this fall. Like, there's no big Friday night things around here.
Yeah, so it is different around here for sure. I mean, if you do go down south, it's crazy.
Right.
It's nuts. 20,000 people at a high school football game. So obviously it impacts the community, right? It's something to rally around. So that like I was saying, it varies from community to community, but. Using Holden as an example, like the soccer program, I know at one point they had 1,000 kids in the youth soccer program from like kindergarten through 8th grade.
Yes. Yeah.
1,000 kids, right? That's crazy. How many families are involved? How many, what's the ripple effect? How many officials do you need? Every kid has 2 parents and brothers and sisters. You're talking about just the youth soccer program impacting probably 3,000 or 4,000 people. That's like a quarter of the town. Okay.
Wow. Yeah.
If you think about it that way, right? So like every Saturday morning, a quarter of the residents of Holden are involved in the same activity.
Davis Hill and Dawson, or
right. Every school has. They're all over the place. Yeah. Right here.
Yeah.
Mount View. They're everywhere. Right.
Right.
And so. I used to joke around that I wasn't Sean Leary, I was Deirdre's dad.
Right. Right. Oh, there's Deirdre's dad.
Yeah. So Deirdre's my oldest, right? So when we moved to Holden, she was the first one to start participating in sports, and that's how we met a lot of people, was through youth sports and standing on the sideline and, hey, who are you? My dog. What number's your daughter? Et cetera, right? So. It definitely brings people together. And then as those kids grow up, a lot of them maintain friendships that they started because of, youth sports. And you think about it, there's 3 elementary schools in town, right? And so those elementary schools allow kids to form, their own tribes revolving around their neighborhood and their classroom. But if you get involved in youth sports, you're now going to meet kids from the other 2 elementary schools, okay?
Right.
It's surprising how many kids don't know each other.
It's true.
Because they live in different neighborhoods and they go to different schools. So it absolutely brings the community together. And then when you go to the middle school, you walk down the hall and you recognize that kid because they were on your little league team or your soccer team. So you've already got friends, and that goes all the way through, through high school. Parents socialize together because they met on the side of a field.
So here's a question I didn't plan to ask, but I'm going to ask it, and feel free to tell me you just don't know, because this is kind of an intense one. How then, based on what you're saying, how then does the pandemic affect, in general, the relationships? Because I know that there wasn't 1,000 people this fall, right, involved in soccer. I wish there was, but there was a definite smaller amount than what was happening 2 years ago, right?
Yeah. So I don't want to get sidetracked into a political discussion,
right.
But I will say that I was involved in the education industry. I still am, but I was involved a little bit more heavily when the pandemic started or leading up to the pandemic. And so I have a lot of friends that work at different schools and different aspects of the education industry. And kind of the common consensus among, the people that I knew as we talked were that there was a very, very high likelihood that the side effects of the pandemic were going to have a greater impact in a negative way than the actual pandemic on specifically on teenagers and younger. And unfortunately, that has played out to be true.
Yeah.
The level of mental health issues among young people is skyrocketed.
Yep.
You can't even get an appointment with a therapist if you want to. It's virtually impossible.
Yeah.
And so without going into a lot more detail, which there is a tremendous amount of detail, huge negative impact. And I think that reinforces without a doubt what the value of youth athletics is. You're seeing the results of young people not being able to socialize, not being able to be as active as they have been. And I haven't seen any positive results of that, only negative, right? So I think that reinforces what we've been talking about.
So what you're saying is we shouldn't just put our kids into the metaverse today?
I don't even know what the metaverse is,
Okay.
So I would say no.
Okay. And probably the most important question that I could ask today. Are there any sports that you look at as absolutely ridiculous and you think to yourself, why is that considered a sport?
You're a great argument. So I'll be careful here that because I want people to appreciate what I said before this, and I don't want to delegitimize myself.
You're not going to say cheerleading, are you?
On this topic. So I think any type of physical activity is fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. And any type of anything that gets young people to be inquisitive and to learn is fantastic. My own, among my 8 children, every sport possible practically they participated in at one point or another growing up, plus dancing, plus music, and plus some other things, okay?
Yeah.
So it's all positive. I personally question that whether it's a sport, not that it's not athletic and not that the people doing it aren't very, very athletic, but if you need somebody to watch you do it and then write down the score to compare against another person or group that did whatever you were doing, and then you decide who won based on somebody's opinion, I don't think that's really a sport. Okay, it's an athletic activity,
Event.
and those people and the people that participate are doing something great, and there's nothing negative about it. But I don't know that I would consider it a sport.
An actual sport.
Yeah, if I'm putting the results in the hands of
People outside of the sport, outside of the event.
Outside of the event, yeah. And there's human involvement in everything. We can talk forever about umpires and officials and whether they make the right call or the wrong call, but they're really involved in that that game or that event, right? And they're really part of it. Versus like you and I could be judging something right now, and talking about it, and maybe I don't like the color red, so red team a little bit less of a score.
Right. Well, there was a lot of talk about that in like the during the Cold War years, right? And a lot of the Russian judges would or Bulgarian judges or Romanian judges.
Well, sure, and it's not even that complicated. If you look, you can do this, and you can do it too as you're watching. You go look at the host country for every Olympics and look at how many medals the host country won, and then look at how many medals they won in the 2 Olympics prior to that and the 2 Olympics after that.
Oh, wow. Is that a thing?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
And are you talking specifically in these events where
because
outside judges are watching, or even...
Well, because a lot of Olympic events, figure skating,
gymnastics,
a lot of skiing events, and now that the X Games have become more integrated into Olympics, there's a lot of judging going on, and so
opposed to,
without a doubt impacts the results.
Because they're subjective instead of objective.
Correct.
Wow, that's great. Well, thanks, Sean. I appreciate your wisdom, and I really wanted to just have this conversation because obviously, you know, one of the things I've noticed is my own kids, you know, they are very active. You know, they're still off the walls, but it would be very easy, especially in the era in which we live, for our kids to stay in, even in the winter. We have to kind of make up, you know, go outside. And it's so easy with electronics and with the pandemic and all that. And I really have just seen how sports has been huge and important in terms of relationship, all the things you talked about, mental health, physical health, spiritual health, it's all together. So I appreciate your wisdom on that. And thank you for checking us out here on the Chaffin Church podcast. Don't forget to check back next week. We'll have another awesome episode. And also, we're here every Sunday morning at 10:30 at 155 Shrewsbury Street in Holden, Massachusetts. Have a great day. And hey, this has been Chaffin Good News. Now go and give some out.